What is going on, Jet fans? Matt O'Leary back with another video. In today's video, I'd like to take a look at a draft prospect, Troy Fautanu, as he is now being talked about much more with the New York Jets than in weeks and months gone by. And I'm sure we have some people who maybe they don't know a ton about him yet and are wondering, why is this someone who is now, after free agency, getting linked to the New York Jets? So the reason why I wanted to discuss Troy Fautanu today is because, well, I mocked him to the New York Jets in my most recent mock draft that I put out earlier today. It was in a trade down spot, though. I slid back 7 spots, picked up a second round pick, and drafted Troy Fautanu. And 2 other people who I respect their work a lot in the industry, Connor Rogers, mocked Troy Fautanu to the Jets at pick number 10, and Trevor Sikkema of PFF actually did the same thing in mock drafts today. So that's 3, including myself. Not that I'm putting myself in that same category with those 2. They are much more in tune with the NFL draft, and I'm a Jets fan who likes the NFL draft, but I don't cover it every single day like they do. But I found that it was interesting that this is a name that's been much more popular. I know that there's a subsection on Twitter of guys who really like him, but if the Jets are going to be in this spot where they could potentially be moving back, which is also a fan fave in the NFL draft for options, Troy Fautanu, I think, suddenly puts himself in that picture. So before we get into him in particular, I want to talk about the logic used. Now, if I'm at pick 10 and determined on going with offensive line for the Jets, I would have Fashanu or Fuaga ahead of Fautanu. But in a move down spot where I think you're probably losing out on both of those guys, then I think the next best offensive line option for me, in my opinion, again, we have other people like J.C. Latham more, other people like Amarius Mims more, and there's again, it's your own personal preference, but Fautanu would be that next guy up for me. And something that I talked about before in the mock draft earlier today, and I've tried to say it on Twitter or X and just anywhere I go and talk about the Jets, especially after the Tyron Smith signing, the Jets have options in the NFL draft. So I'm not sitting here on, what's today, March 18th, and saying the Jets are absolutely taking an offensive lineman. That's silly, because you can make a strong case for taking tight end. You can make in Brock Bowers specifically, you can make a strong case for taking a best wide receiver there. You can make a case for trading down. You can make a case for, once you trade down, to go with a wide receiver, or you could also make a pretty good case for the offensive line. Like, moral of the story, draft a good player on the offense. And the Jets set themselves up where they could be in a spot where any of those things that I just laid out could be beneficial to them in 2024. But why offensive line? Didn't they just trade for a right tackle in Morgan Moses, and didn't they just sign Tyron Smith? Well, yes, they absolutely did. But both of those guys are on, either for Morgan Moses, the last year of his existing contract, or the first year of a 1-year deal. They're on expiring contracts. So neither one of those guys are long-term answers. And you also have to factor in Tyron Smith's injury history, as he has not played a full season since 2015. Again, that does not mean that you definitely have to go offensive line, but that signing and trade doesn't necessarily take offensive line completely out of the picture, because it still would be a need in 2025. Factoring in injuries, you're more than likely to get your offensive lineman, if you were to draft one in the first round anyway, on the field at some point. And Troy Fautanu, I think, is someone who would be a really good fit in a trade down spot. And the reason for that is he's flexible. To me, and this is not a unique thought, it's very well, a lot of people have made this comparison. It feels like Elijah Vera Tucker all over again, where he is a flexible prospect. Some project him at a tackle, some project him at guard. Now, what he might have above AVT is he has the arm length. He measured out to 34.5-inch arms, which is more than okay at tackle. I truly believe that Fautanu will be a tackle at the next level, but again, he does have that flexibility where he can play guard or tackle, and he's done well. He's did it the last 2 years at Washington at left tackle, at what I would consider a very high level. He allowed 2 sacks and 23 pressures this past year, 6 penalties. In 2022, he allowed 0 sacks on the season. And I just like in his pass protection, I like how he uses his hands, and I think he has good footwork as well. Stylistically, this is an offensive lineman that fits the new style that the Jets are going. And what do I mean by this new style? Well, when you bring in John Simpson and you bring in Morgan Moses, you're bringing in 2 absolute maulers. And I think a mauler is an appropriate description of how Fautanu plays. It's also an appropriate description of how Talisi Fuaga plays. But as I mentioned in my scenario, I was moving back. And if I'm moving back to, we'll say 15 or less, I don't think Fuaga is going to be there. I think he's going to go off the board in the top, we'll call it 14 picks. So there's a chance the Jets could move back and get him anyway. But again, I wanted to focus on Fautanu in this one because he has been a name that's been brought up a lot more recently for the Jets than in weeks gone by. So some Jet fans who maybe are more casual to the NFL draft and then they kind of just focus in on the prospects that are being linked to the New York Jets, they might not know a ton about him. But again, he's a very physical player. He's solid in pass protection. He might have a little bit of ways to go in the run game. Not in a huge way. Like he still plays with that athleticism and that toughness and that mentality that really fits with what Joe Douglas is building on the offensive line this year. And this is absolutely going to be a name that Jet fans are going to want to familiarize themselves with over the next month in this draft prospect, because again, they have options going into the NFL draft. It's not a lock that the Jets are going to go one position, whether it's tight end, Brock Bowers, wide receiver, or on the offensive line. They can move down, depends on how much they want to move down. The appeal of trading back is to acquire a second-round pick, which is what the New York Jets do not have. There were some rumblings over the weekend that they maybe were a little bit more likely to be interested in trading back because they don't have that second-round pick. And with this draft class in particular, good news, there are guys at offensive line and more specifically wide receiver who can be there in the second round if you have a top 55 pick, top 50 pick in the NFL draft and get immediate impact guys. Like if you moved back and in this example drafted Fautanu and then in the second round you're looking at guys like Roman Wilson or you're looking at guys like Ricky Pearsall or whoever else, then you're in a pretty good spot of adding hopefully a Mike Williams who is flying in to meet with the Jets later tonight and really meeting with them tomorrow morning, and Garrett Wilson. So I like the idea of a trade back a lot. It's going to be a very popular thing among Jet fans. I know like Green Bean in particular, Green Bean loves a trade back almost as much as he loves Kenny Yeboah. He loves a trade back. And if you can get both sides to tango, right? Because it takes 2 to tango. If you get a team that wants to move up for whatever reason, and the Jets are able to slide back 5 to 7, 4, 5, 6, 7 spots, and they land a Troy Fautanu who could be very, very good for them in 2024 in case of emergency, and then also a long-term answer at one of your tackle spots with also acquiring a wide receiver in the second round who could be starting for you in 11 personnel and push Allen Lazard down the roster, that excites me. I think that would be a good plan for the New York Jets. But I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts in particular on Troy Fautanu? Do you like him, what you've seen so far? Were you also surprised when he kept getting linked to the New York Jets recently? Let me know. I'm Matt, and I'll catch you next time.